So just to clarify, actually, the way we set this up was actually to be a conversation. That was my understanding, rather than an interview. Yeah. So we kind of the hope is that through us having a conversation between the three of us, we'll give an indication of where we are possibly going to be going this year, and by including your questions, your comments, then hopefully we can broaden that out to give us a full sense of this coming year, and hopefully engender a bit of excitement, enthusiasm for this theme. So let's see where we go. So having said that, do you have a question or an observation you'd like to just to kick us off?
Yeah, from behind the scenes, I'm aware of how this theme and the sort of wording of it has evolved, and I think there's been quite a lot of work that has gone to get these three words. So I'm quite just intrigued, partly around the story of why each word has been chosen. But yeah, just I'm aware this is your kind of, particularly your inspiration as where the root of it came from. So I just wanted to hear, why does Be the Revolution speak to you? Where did that come from?
Okay, thanks. I'll give that a shot. So yes, I mean, firstly to say, I think it's important to acknowledge that Be the Revolution is the kind of a key theme, particularly for Sangha night, and the different classes will try to draw out different resonances or aspects of that phrase. So the different classes will have a slightly different take on that, on those three words, but I think hopefully you'll get a sense of the direction of travel that we're trying to set up. And I can say a little bit about where it came from as my own sort of inspiration. I suppose it partly feeling a level of despair, to be honest. I really found listening to all the or watching all the stuff around COP26 so deeply depressing as a kind of this is as far as we can get in some ways in relation to climate change, but also being very involved with friends who have been gluing themselves to roads around the country, and kind of wondering to what extent that really is going to make a difference to where we find ourselves. And I suppose, I'm very aware of the work that's been done here in the centre over the last year with the Eco Practice Group, Eco Crisis Practice Group. That's been, I think, a very important contribution to the discussion that we've been having here in the centre about how to engage with our own practice in relation to the broader society, the world as we find ourselves in it. And for me, I think where I come back to is recognizing that the main thing I can do to benefit the world is to try to stay in awareness of what's actually in my experience, and on the basis of that, try to act out of what's actually in my experience and what's actually going on in a skillful way to respond to my own experience of suffering, but also meeting suffering in the world. And I think without that base of being in awareness in myself, I haven't really got a ground, a foundation to work from. And I think one of the things that, the key thing that I think we offer as a Buddhist centre, as a community, is this capacity to come into our own experience and live out of that, hopefully for the benefit of ourselves and others. If we haven't got that ground, then I think we are prey to these kind of the flux of the worldly winds that are constantly bombarding us, that are so difficult to, unless we have got this ground of being, we haven't really got the foundations to work from. So the be is really an important part, I think, in terms of the phrase be. And it's revolutionary because it's actually saying, I can have an effect on my life and an effect on the world. Simply, this act of being in awareness is revolutionary. It's a revolutionary act to really take responsibility for one's mental states, for one's emotional life, and try to come into relationship with others. Sorry, I'm kind of aware I'm just going off on one.
I feel like there's a few different threads that I could have picked out.
Good, well.
Yeah, I think the first thing was, I mean, you started talking about sort of activism in there, and I really like that the centre, Buddhists, us, you are responding to and seeing what's happening in the world outside the centre and thinking about that, and either if you are an activist thinking about it, or if you have no interest or you're just observing, I like that kind of being in relationship to the world and what's actually happening, and is a concern for a lot of people at the moment on some level. But there's also that side of, so if you don't want to be an activist, or at least in that way, you know, what are we looking at, the revolutions, or how does that speak to people who aren't going down that path? And then Esme and Naravira may or may not have something to say. So yeah, I was just wondering kind of how do you approach this title? Is there anything that you would like to communicate, particularly around the revolution word?
Particularly around the revolution word. Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Kind of, I suppose when I was getting involved with the Dharma, I was feeling quite revolutionary at the time, you could say. I suppose I was interested in changing the world. I was at university, and I was part of the student union, this incredibly left-wing student union. One of the things I noticed about it was that it wasn't a very harmonious world, and it made me reflect about that and what was the way to change. And I realized that the way that these people were relating with each other in this sort of microcosm of the student union reflected the larger world that we were in. So they couldn't be so harmonious amongst themselves, but they kind of wanted harmony in the world. And as then I started thinking, I suppose, or two things came together in me about spiritual ideas I was aware of and revolution. And when I came across Sangha's teachings, that was one of the things that I felt drawn to. So I felt that he sort of was trying to instigate a revolution, but a very different kind of revolution of consciousness, you could say, revolution of the individual. And so it brought those two streams of myself together. So I think, you can't, the Buddha's life was a revolution life. He changed enormous the world that we're in. Words like mindfulness sprang out of that kind of culture. And we can't separate ourselves from our experience of the world, because inevitably the world comes to find us. So I don't think you can be a Buddhist and not sort of be a revolutionary, to be honest. The other thing that Sangha actually said about, well, one of the things he sort of said about the general nature of the different religions, one of the the sort of setting sins of different religions. The one of the Buddhist religion was complacency, sort of, or even switching into indifference. So I think it is a thing that can happen. You sort of think, oh, well, you can't change the world, so I'll just go off and meditate and sort myself out. But that's not what the Buddha did. And I don't think it's what we can really do. And I think we're seeing this now, that in this world, if we want to exist in this world, we have to be in some way be a part of it. How we be a part of it and how we have an effect on it, that's a question for ourselves to work out. And something that, I hope over this year, that's the exploration. We will kind of work that out for ourselves. What it means to be a revolutionary Buddhist.
And what just coming to mind was that sort of, in order to have a positive effect or have any kind of real direction or intention in the change you're trying to make, even if it's the change you actually make isn't quite 100% what you intended. That's starting with yourself. Like, you need to be aware within yourself in order to actually go and make positive changes. Or
how you are is how you change the world. So if you're a certain way, that will be in the way that you try to change the world. So that you can't sort of ignore those two poles, I suppose, what Buddhism would be saying about it.
And in terms of those poles, I think one of the really important aspects, why it's one of the three jewels, is that community is such a key element to Dharma practice, that actually we need each other to support and nourish each other, and to test out our views, test out our experience against others, alongside others, so that we can start to refine and discover this potential of the relational life of community. Because I think particularly, I think it's post-pandemic, or not how can I say post-pandemic? We're still in the thick of it, of course, but there's something about that such an isolating effect that the pandemic has had on us as a society, that it's pushed us into isolation, and certainly personally really recognize how important that sense of the mirror of other people is, to actually maintain any sense of reality. One can get lost in one's own kind of circular thoughts and mindset, and we need each other to help us kind of break out or bring a different perspective to those circular aspects of our mind, which we will and do drop into when we are in isolation. I think we are inherently social creatures. And I think it's so important that we kind of honour that and really, well, I certainly just coming in here today, I haven't been here since the 19th of December, I think. So to come back into this space, and just that the importance of simply meeting in this way, to me, it's crucial for practice. So, Do you have something else, Esme?
That's just making me think about, I think particularly the word be in the title, but I think the whole thing, I don't know, resonates with me to some degree, or kind of there's some, it feels like it's got energy and life in it, and particularly the element of it. I find it can be easy to like listen to a talk and be like, oh yes, it's all very interesting, but not really actually. I'm kind of sick of the word embody, so like replace that with like something else, but like actually putting into action something and becoming it and sort of living that thing, rather than just sort of observing. I think I can be inspired by something and they're like, oh, I'm going to make this change or do this thing, and then it doesn't happen. So there's something in the action of becoming or being the revolution which really appeals to me. I guess they're integrating it into myself rather than being this separate kind of this idea I like and then actually me.
Well, I was just thinking about our little conversation earlier when we were talking about, or maybe what stops people coming to the centre or carrying on getting involved. We were having a conversation about this earlier, maybe what happens. And at some point, perhaps it starts to bite for people. And we were saying about, or I said, you have to become the Dharma yourself. And I think that's true of the revolution part of it. You become. The Dharma is a revolution of oneself. And if one truly embodies that, then it communicates itself to the world.
Yeah, I think that's right. And one of the things about the being, which I think is so important, and is this thing of being fully ourselves. I think one of the difficulties that we can have in trying to participate in what we might, we call it, describe it, the spiritual life. Somehow the spiritual life is sometimes seen as separate from just our life. And I think it's so important that the being is the being of the whole of us, and that we bring the whole of ourselves into relationship with each other and the Dharma. I think that's the only way that, so this quality of being is why I kind of feel it's not just an idea about how we might be or could be, some idea of it. It's actually, it is an embodied experience and, a full-blooded, full-hearted experience of practice, which I think is so crucial in really, to give us the opportunity to really live our potential as human beings. Because I do think we can be so diminished by feeling there's a particular way we have to be. We've been kind of educated into getting it right. There's so often a right and a wrong in our education system. So a more kind of exploratory and questioning state of being, I think, is so important for the Dharma life. To actually, as we were talking earlier as well, again, actually being in a state of questioning and investigation, exploration, rather than this is how it is, this is how it has to be. It's, what is this? What is it to be human? To sit here with each other, to meet each other, and try to live out of that direct, very immediate experience. And out of that, we don't know what the revolution will come, what shape the revolution will be. But personally, and I hope, as the basis of Dharma practice, we trust that actually, if we just really are deeply connected to ourselves and each other, that which wants to manifest, the Dharma, which we're trying to serve, will actually flow into the world for our benefit and for the benefit of others.
Just thinking in tying with what Naravira was saying about our conversation around when people come to either this Buddhist center or other places, and then why do they go? They're just sort of thinking, I think that, there's that like hint and vision of like, oh, I want to change or be happy or make a difference. But then, there's that changing your life to make that possible, that you actually have to change things, and, which is uncomfortable. Like, I don't think overall people are very good with change. And in terms as well as you don't know what's going to come out of the effort you put in. That was just sort of striking me that that's another kind of uncertainty which takes some level of strength or like trust or commitment to actually go through with, like, walking into something you don't quite know what's on the other side. Just reflecting.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, that one, isn't it? Coming along to a Buddhist centre because we want to be happy. But that immediately suggests that actually we are not happy. So part of me thinks it would be great to be able to just come into the Buddhist centre and say, I'm unhappy, I'm hurting. And that's something, that then's a real starting point for a real relationship. So there's something about that being, which I think is so important, that actually, rather than trying to jump to the next step, we start where we are and build from that, build relationship out of those actual experiences and discover what that might lead to, which is hard work. I mean, I think that's one of the kind of unfortunate truths of the Dharma, is that actually to be committed to self-awareness, self-knowledge, isn't always easy work. But I don't know any other more kind of fruitful, meaningful thing to do, really, than really try to be honest with one's own experience alongside others, and allow that truth of that to bring meaning and value.
And so, like, I think it's hard work, but it's like worth it. Plus, I think it's easier to just keep going in your normal circle of, not feeling good and then feeling okay enough, so then you just carry on, not working to do anything. But that in a way, that's also hard work, just going up and down this, like, roller coaster. But yeah, it's like you've got to take a big step of effort to sort of break out of the loop or something. I was also just aware that so for Sangha in particular, this theme is relevant too, and that there's going to be a structure of doing a few different sort of courses amongst the Sangha evenings. I was just wondering if there's anything you wanted to share around that and how that relates to the theme, why these courses have been chosen and what they're on.
Yes, so we are going to run a number of courses. So we thought we'd roughly follow ethics, meditation, wisdom. Well, give it a name, but I think it will expand out of perhaps simplistic ideas of what that might look like. Bhadra's going to be running a course based on the wheel of life. So that's the thing through the wheel, spiral, and the mandala, which is the one we're talking about, those three aspects of ethics, meditation, and wisdom. So the place we're starting from, the wheel, which I think is also, the wheel is supposed to be sort of a mirror to ourselves. And so it's not just that this is a prescriptive thing, but trying to explore, well, what if we hold a mirror up to ourselves, what do we see? As a place to start from, and the importance of being able to do that for ourselves, I think. We're exploring ethics as well, but we're going to try and explore it from the ground upwards. Again, not being prescriptive about our ethical lives, or comparative, this is the ethical standard and I need to, but looking at what it is that stands in our way and how paying attention to our behaviour. I prefer that kind of word to ethics in some ways. How paying attention to that can make a difference for us. So based on sort of the mirror of ourselves, knowing ourselves, we start to look at, well, what can we change in relationship to that. Then we'll look at meditation. Probably run some sort of course on meditation. But again, the emphasis on trying to explore our direct experience and make it very real. And then at the end of the year, we'll shift into the mandala. But again, although the mandala is talking about that level of wisdom, trying to bring that level of wisdom down to something that we can see for ourselves, and rather than wisdom always being some sort of lofty idea or something that's very far away, trying to bring that wisdom down to ways that we can work, ways that we can inform our experience to go and work intelligently.
So that's great. So that's Sangha night. And of course, we have all these other opportunities as well. So we're using we'll be hoping to use the festivals this year, based to sort of draw out the theme. We want the arts events will have their own emphasis, looking at beauty as a way of, why is art so revolutionary? Why does that have that same potential to open us up to each other and the sort of the mystery of being human? We have a retreat, various retreats coming up. We have communication weekends. We have retreat at Adhisthana booked in. So there's a whole range of different things that we will be doing. So I'm just aware of the time. I'm wondering whether it's kind of whether we. Yeah. So I'm aware you've been. The three of us have had this sort of kind of conversation here, and so wondering whether there's any observations or questions anybody has here in the room, or if you're online, they can be, you can share them, or they'll be shared to us. So anything? Shradalokshani, thank you.
So we're talking in quite big terms about being a revolution. It's the start of the year, people have new intentions. In practical terms, what are your intentions for the revolution?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Repeat that next week.
Yeah. So Sradalokshani was saying, well, you've been talking quite big terms, big kind of visionary terms, but chunking it down to your own experience. What are you going to do about it? That was to me, or the three of us. Oh, well, that's great. Yeah.
You go first, though.
Oh, thanks. Well, I think for me, very much it is chunking it down to really just trying to be more fully who I am. I think that's my intention for my life generally, but I think I can see that in relation to this year. I think I've been for too long, too much of my life, to somewhere I've either felt I've always got it wrong, or I'm having to sort of bolster what I'm doing in some ways to kind of overcompensate for not quite trusting my own experience. So I think I would say, in terms of chunking down my experience, or chunking down, be the revolution, I think the revolutionary act, as I was suggesting, is really to trust who I am and trust that by bringing that into relationship, something fruitful will arise out of that. Over to you, Esme.
I was talking to St. Manus earlier, and I was like, I don't have any New Year's resolutions because I kind of always forget about it. But I think, at the moment, my sort of vision for me personally of what I want to try and work with is this sort of staying more with myself. I very easily I'm always trying to see myself as if I'm imagining that I'm somebody else, and then I kind of get a bit lost in that, and then I start acting in ways or saying things or doing things which aren't quite like me, I guess, but it's because I'm kind of worried about the judgment. of others, and then that sort of applies in so many other ways. So the amount of effort I put in isn't necessarily about the amount of energy that I have or enthusiasm or anything. It's about, how good do I need to make it when this other person sees it? So my kind of intention is to just try and work with that, staying with like, what are my values? Why am I doing this? What do I need to do? Even if someone else thinks I'm being lazy because I'm sort of taking the afternoon off, which is a big story. We're like, no, I'm taking the afternoon. And like, yeah, just keep on coming back to like, what is actually the best thing to do, regardless of what this person thinks or this person thinks. Yeah, so that's kind of a big thing that I'm working with at the moment. What's that face?
Don't know. See how it unfolds. Well, I suppose what I'm interested in. Well, I'm interested in this thing about community, but I'm interested in separation. What causes separation, in us? Why we separate from the world? Why we separate from others? Yeah, what does it really mean to sort of live beyond that sense of separation? The world seems to me at the moment to be ever more dividing. It's a reactions against one against the other. Community seems lacking in society. Well, yeah. Qualities that make up that, things like trust, etc. Yeah, social capital. Some it's referred. Let's talk about social capital. And you know what the Dharma can offer in terms of people reconnecting with themselves, reconnecting with each other. So that's what I'm interested in exploring. I'm really interested in exploring. I can't take a Buddhist idea off the shelf and plonk it in the brain. I want us to, embody that wish, I suppose, that I have to find community. So the process by which we come to explore that together reflects that sense of going beyond that sense of separation.
Thanks, Naravira. I'm just.
Yeah, there's a question from home when you're ready.
Yeah.
So, Melanie is just asking, kind of clarifying, do we start with our own inner revolution or changes, which we then act on and take it into the world? So being present with ourselves and others in a meaningful way, rather than superficial, for example, trauma, pain, fear, being present with those experiences.
So I'm assuming those people online, is that in the chat box online? Okay, so everybody get a sense of that. So thanks, Nalini, for the question. So I think we have to start with ourselves. Where else can we start? We have to start with our actual experience. This is kind of basic Buddhist teaching, to actually be aware and know what's happening as it's happening. How we work with our own experience and bring it into relation to others is that is the project in a way. And as we've been speaking in our own ways, there's no simple answer to that. I think we have to look for appropriate places and spaces to talk if we've got particular issues that we're working with. But I think more generally, I do think we have to actually know as far as possible what we are living out of in order to engage with the world. For instance, as you're suggesting, Nalini, if we're carrying a lot of pain or trauma, sometimes that can be quite activated invisibly without us even recognizing, noticing that that's been activated. And so our engagement then is being affected without it being that visible to us. So it's important that we kind of bring consciousness to our patterns of mind, of being. And of course, we're looking as far as possible to integrate all these different aspects of ourselves, these different layers of ourselves, but also bring a kind of quality of kindness, of warm attention to our experience, to actually make it manageable, to make it so that we can actually work with it productively. Hence the meditation practices that we use in the community here. But I don't know whether that's enough, Nalini, but it's a little indication. Was there anything else, Maitri Jyoti?
So there's one thing with the battery.
Yeah.
So regarding activism, this is important from a Buddhist perspective, partly because social and political structures can either inhibit people or support freedom.
That sounds like a statement rather than a question.
Yeah. Yes, it's a comment.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Thank you, Vimla Bhadra. I accept that as I think it is an important one. And I would say, we're trying, as Naravira was saying, we're trying to work with these two poles, that we do have the social end, or the social and political end of the pole, but we also have our own element that we're working with, our own internal life, our internal and relational life that we're working with. And I think my suggestion, and I hope that the invitation of Buddhism, is that we actually really give full attention to this end, the subjective end of that relationship, in order to be more effective, or as effective as possible, in the political and social spheres. I think if we get lost in the political or the social sphere, if we lose that ground of our own experience, then on what basis are we acting? On what basis are we kind of trying to engage with life? So we need this end of the dynamic of the relationship to make it as effective as possible. I think that's the point I'm wanting to sort of push, really. I think it's important we do act, but I think we need to, as Buddhists, as a center, I think it's important that we really emphasize this subjective or the internal aspect of practice as a sort of foundation, really.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think it's nice to do with suffering. I think the Buddha said that his teaching was, what he mainly addressed was suffering and the causes of suffering. And the recognition that most of us, most of the time, our suffering starts with ourselves, something that we are doing, something we're not seeing, that's causing that suffering. And, I think in that respect, the Dharma is medicine for the world. the giant mental illness that we all suffer under, which is the illusions that we suffer under. And it's, for me, it's like a whole medicine. Once you engage with that in yourself, then it does spill out over into the world as a whole.
Yeah.
And that's why I suppose for me, engage with Dharma practice or trying to facilitate Dharma practice for people does feel like a kind of act of revolution.
Yeah.
I mean, I could choose to spend my time getting involved with XR, with the Green Party, with things that I wasn't doing this and might be very attracted towards doing that sort of thing. But what is it that causes, what ameliorates the greatest amount of suffering? So I suppose what I've learned through time is question how can we communicate that to the world in whatever sphere that might be in. So I have to be working in the world in a particular way, then within that sphere.
Yeah. I think going back to what you were saying earlier about the kind of the tendency of the modern world to split and fragment, which I do think comes out of the political life to some extent, that it's dependent on splitting and creating opposition. And I suppose one of the interesting things I think about Dharma practice is actually trying to bring together the warring parts within ourselves, really, which we can sometimes project outwards onto others, when in fact it's just because we are so intolerant of those parts within ourselves. So I have a trump within. This is the confession of the evening.
These things in the past.
Okay.
I was just thinking in terms of the kind of Bhadri's comment around activism. I'm very pro people doing something and getting their voices heard and making change happen. But I think for me personally, I guess it's I don't. From my side, I felt pressured to be involved, it's the right thing to do in terms of protesting and that kind of activism. And that was horrible. I was not in a good place. I was already quite anxious, and it made me then feel even more anxious that I wasn't, doing things right, doing things well enough. And then luckily I did manage to stop myself from getting too involved, because I think I would have just burnt out and been useless. And so there is that kind of, I suppose I'm just concerned that there can be this kind of pressure so that you've got to be like a protester on the streets. But I think that's great if you want to do that, then do that. But there's also an element of you might not be there right now. So what can you do with what you your current situation?
Anna, I'm aware you need to catch the bus. Lovely to see you. You can leave all that. Leave that.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Any more questions?
I think it sounds like a really good topic. I feel excited by it.
Great.
I love to talk, bringing all ourselves in, exploring it with others. I felt isolated over the last. It's sort of drip by drip isolation. I haven't felt it straight away. I'm just feeling sort of I don't know, yeah, just drip by drip being isolated. So this kind of feels like it's a antidote to that. So
Right,
thank you.
good. That's definitely the intention. Okay, is there anything else, or we could do what true Buddhists do? We could drink tea. So those of you online, we are going to have a tea break now, and then
I think we should go into small groups.
Yeah.
afterwards and